John McMullen, his appearance today on the show, it's brought to you by Gino, the winemaker's choice for 50 years. Visit Gino Pinto on the White Horse Pike in Hamilton, online at GinoPinto.com. Gino's, the winemaker's choice for 50 years. And don't forget to catch John on the Countdown to Kickoff show Thursday night, 6 to 7. They'll have Eagles and Panthers. But right now, we are taking a look back at John, I don't know, maybe one of the more dominating performances in quite some time. I mean, I asked the question earlier, was this game more impressive than the game they beat Pittsburgh last year?
Well, real quick, before I get into that, I'm screaming through the phone, no on Journey. I don't know what PT's thinking there. That's a new guy in Journey. Come on.
I was just
not even close. Not even close.
Phil Collins' Genesis better than Peter Gabriel Genesis. How about that?
No. That's from a pop star standpoint and a success standpoint is probably correct, but not from a better band standpoint. But I'm here to talk about the Eagles. So, was it more impressive than the Pittsburgh win? Very comparable. The way they did it in all three phases, they dominated this game in every phase. You rarely see that in the NFL, where you have just such an advantage in each aspect of the game. Obviously, offensively, defensively, Arizona was too one-dimensional. We talked about that on the Countdown, the Kickoff show. That proved to be true. Banged up on the offensive line, even further so when Alex Boone wasn't able to go. So they couldn't deal with the Eagles' front four. And then the special teams. It's been good since Dave Fipp has been here as far as special teams go with the Eagles. And you see how, you lose one of the best punt returners of all time. And you take somebody who was on the street 2 weeks ago, and you return 176 yards almost for a touchdown. I can't speak enough about how good Dave Fipp is at what he does.
Yeah, Barner, not only that, he kind of was in that Sproles role a little bit yesterday. They did incorporate him into the offense. John, I talked about it at the beginning of the show. It was a lot of underappreciated, unheralded guys who stood out yesterday, guys that you had a lot of question marks at the beginning of the year. Nelson Aguilar, Torrey Smith, Jalen Mills, Patrick Robinson. Those were guys that we were all saying, how do you win with those guys on your team?
Yeah, and it's been that way all year. I think that's been the most impressive part of this. You've seen yesterday specifically. You just saw the influx of injuries throughout this league. Some really, really big names, starting with J.J. Watt and Odell Beckham, and those are serious injuries and season-ending injuries. So those are crippling types. But the Eagles have had quite a few injuries, and they've really been able to weather the storm, and that's the mark of a good team. At some point, we're going to have to admit this is a pretty good football team because when you lose people like Darren Sproles, who's gone for the year, or whether it's Fletcher Cox, who's been gone for the past 2 weeks, or Ronald Darby, who's been gone since the season opener, and you're able to patch people in and get victories. That's what this league is about. In a lot of ways, it's a war of attrition. And the Eagles have been able to handle injuries better than most teams.
Yeah, and one injury they might have to handle is Lane Johnson. You wrote about it today that, they might have to move on without him on Thursday night. First off, what are the chances he gets cleared for Thursday? About Zippo?
Yeah, I wouldn't say completely, but I would say certainly less than 10%. And Doug even admitted, they have to move forward. They have to practice today, and they have to practice tomorrow. They're traveling on Wednesday, and then the game is here. So just from a logistical standpoint, he's got to go through a number of steps. The final one being clear from an independent neurologist. The timing is just not good in a short week. You can get that done if it's a typical week and the game's on Sunday. But the reality is he's not going to be ready to go by that time. So the Eagles know that.
Do they take that into account? Does the NFL take that into account? Do they get to check him earlier, or do they not care about that?
No, they don't care about that. It's very structured now, and it's got to do more with, legal ramifications than anything else to get cleared through the concussion protocol. So it's just one of those unfortunate things. Nobody likes playing on these short weeks because of the lack of preparation to begin with. And then you have situations like that crop up. Hardly the first team to go through it, won't be the last team. But we all know how Lane Johnson has affected this team when he hasn't been on the field. 2-8 versus 9-2 since the start of last season. I mean, that's pretty glaring, as opposed to having other people on the field, whether it's been Vaitai or in the past it's been Matt Tobin or Isaac Seumalo or players of that nature. And the key is, Vaitai played the whole second half against the Cardinals, and he held up pretty well. He played okay. But the difference, the Panthers also know Lane Johnson's not going to play. They know how the concussion protocol works. So now they get the game plan, understanding that it's going to be Vaitai. The Cardinals, and it wouldn't have mattered anyway, obviously, because the Eagles waxed them, but you're not game planning for players who come in the middle of the game, who might be a weakness. And obviously the Panthers will know that. So it's a big difference coming into a game where people know you're going to play and you might be a possible weak link versus having to make do for a half of football or a quarter of football or something like that.
John, you talk about the record without Lane Johnson in there, but Mike and I have talked about Big V, and how much more do you, John, think that he's prepared to take over than maybe he was last season, for example, in that Redskins game?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think he's certainly more prepared. He's more comfortable, and I think he got better as last season progressed until he got hurt. I mean, he was really bad. You remember his first game in Washington, and it got progressively better. It was never great, but it got incrementally at least a little bit better from week to week. So I think, he really struggled in the preseason and even practice. You could see it at left tackle because now he's the swing tackle and he's got to play right and left tackle. So I think that would be a real issue for him because I don't think he can play left tackle. But on the right side, he's a little bit better, and hopefully all you're looking for is, a similar impact to some of these other players that have given the Eagles, whether it's Rasul Douglas in the place of Ronald Darby or Kenyon Barner with his ability to fill in for Wendell Smallwood yesterday. You don't need greatness, and you're certainly not going to get Lane Johnson, but you do need competency.
One more question on the offensive line for me before we leave that area. And how did you think the combination of Wiz and Warmack looked out there yesterday? Wiz got the majority of the snaps, and then Doug Peterson actually mentioned him today in his media briefing about Wisniewski. How did you think that combination?
Yeah, it's a little weird because Doug finally acknowledged that Chance is still going to play a little bit, but he said Stephen has earned more snaps, so he'd already be getting, as you mentioned, the majority. Now it's going to increase. And I thought that was probably Wisniewski's worst game since he's got in there. Certainly as a run blocker, he did not perform well yesterday. He was pretty good as a pass blocker. And last week, when Doug was talking about the rotation, he kind of explained that Chance weaknesses are Wiz's strengths and vice versa. And that's how the game kind of played out against Arizona, because Warmack was pretty good as a run blocker and struggled in pass protection, and Wisniewski was the opposite. But now they're going to go with Wisniewski. And by the way, I agree with that. He deserves to play. He's the better player. And, why would you want to take the better player off the field? So I agree with it, but it's just weird timing considering what Doug said last week.
The offensive line obviously has been a strength of this team, both in pass blocking and in run blocking here. But the receivers, got to get some credit too, because they made some plays. Aguilar yesterday, that's a catch that it's it's a tough catch. It's not right on the money there, so that's a nice play. The ball and the route really and you wrote about this. You saw a lot more slants yesterday, to get those 3rd and 11s, a lot of first downs. But I thought the receivers did a good job winning their one-on-one battles, and that's a big help when the quarterback has a bigger window to throw that ball to.
Yeah, I mean, it was a big part of the game because on paper it looked like that was advantage Cardinals, and especially early, Arizona was playing a lot of press coverage, and the Eagles were using slants, and guys were beating that press coverage on the line of scrimmage. So that was one of the surprising things. Even Alshon Jeffrey got Patrick Peterson at one point. And you saw Trey Burton get off the line of scrimmage on press coverage on his touchdown. Zach Ertz on his touchdown. And a big first down for Zach Ertz as well on Branch. So they really won those one-on-one battles. And that kind of, by the time the snowball, it was 21-0. The Cardinals were just, gathering around and looking at the sky because they were waiting for the other shoe to drop. They were getting run out of the building.
Yeah, they seemed like they were less than thrilled to be out there in the second half of the game, if you will.
Yeah, it was kind of funny. I wrote, I saw some Cardinals assistants on the elevator down from the press box area to the locker room, and they said, "Is it always this hot here?" Which is weird. Coming from, obviously, these are people from Arizona, and they're talking about how hot and sticky it was in Philadelphia in October. But it got much hotter for Bruce Arians specifically. I mean, it looked like one of the great coaches in this game, and that's what Bruce Arians has been since really he took over when Chuck Pagano got sick in Indianapolis. He's a 2-time coach of the year, this guy. And I hate to bring up Mike Lombardi again, but I got to take a shot at him. 2-time coach of the year doesn't look prepared against the most unprepared coach in history for the last 30 years.
Speaking of which, did the most unprepared coach open the playbook more for Carson Wentz? Are you seeing them expand and give Carson more looks?
Yeah, I think that's a natural progression. I think that's a little bit overstated. Carson doesn't change a whole heck of a lot at the line of scrimmage. It does have a lot of run-pass options built in, but those are things sort of that are built into the game plan. But you see, he's got the ability to check out of a bad play into a good play, and he's way ahead of schedule when it comes to stuff like that, and when it comes to autonomy at the line of scrimmage. You could see, if we're talking 3-4 years from now, this is one of those guys that's going to be able to basically handle a whole game from the line of scrimmage like a Peyton Manning did, or an Aaron Rodgers can do, or a Tom Brady can do.
John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com. Yesterday, obviously, the Eagles dominate. He was there. His observations of the game are up on our website, 97.3 ESPN.com. And then I guess we got to look at the defensive side of the ball here. No Fletcher Cox. Obviously, Darby's been out. The secondary, I mean, to you, was the star of the day the way the secondary held up?
I thought the underreported theme of the whole game was the first series, where the Eagles won the toss deferred, and it was all Jalen Mills. It was the great stop on run support on first down, pass breakup on second down, and then he closed on the third down pass and made a tackle, and the guy dropped the football anyway. And bang, it was 3 and out. Average punt, Eagles get good field position. After a Barner turn, they score the touchdown. And then they're off to the races. They stop them again, and then you have the big Barner return that almost went for the touchdown, and it's 14-0. And basically the game's over, because you're talking about a one-dimensional team to begin with without David Johnson, and then they become even more one-dimensional, zero-dimensional. You got to make up a new term for it because they're non-existent in the running game. They had to drop back. They had to throw the football, and obviously the Eagles knew that defensively, and they're just better up front. than the Cardinals are on the offensive line.
Hey, John, I know that Doug was asked today about guys coming in off the street and stepping in and filling key roles like Jake Elliott and Lovato and Kenyon Barner, who you just talked about. And he was asked who is finding them, and I don't think he ever really answered that part of the question. But Mike and I talked about Howie Roseman, and is Howie Roseman getting enough credit for being able to keep this ship moving in the right direction by bringing the talent in?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've given Howie a lot of credit for building this team since he's been back. I think for the most part, he's done a very good job. Everybody makes certain mistakes. I think obviously they tried to push Isaac Seumalo into the starting lineup because he was a high draft choice. That didn't work out. I thought that was a mistake. But you start to nitpick. I mean, that particular question, if you look at guys, I mean, Rick Lovato is the long snapper. Well, of course you're going to find the long snapper on the street. And the long snappers aren't drafted. And Jake Elliott, it was a fifth-round pick. He was the highest drafted kicker in the NFL this season. So that's good for a kicker. And if the Eagles didn't pick him up, he was going to get swiped up relatively quickly. So it's not like people didn't know who Jake Elliott was. He's a very highly regarded prospect. So, hey, Howie deserves a lot of credit. Just, those names were probably not the best examples. I think the better examples are the way he's built this team as a whole. And you've seen, I think the best signing Howie made this offseason was Patrick Robinson. I mean, he's been unbelievable. He's been one of the best cornerbacks in football. And I don't know how many people saw that coming, because I sure as heck didn't.
No, not only that, I mean, to get Darby back, I mean, that's just going to add there. To get Fletcher back, they've won 2 games without Fletcher. They've won, every game but the Chiefs game without Darby. So you're adding 2, Fletcher's obviously a Pro Bowl level player. Darby's borderline in that spot. So you're adding 2 very key guys back to this defense, so they should only get better on that side of the ball. 5 games in, obviously, you're feeling pretty good with where this team is. What is still a concern if something concerns you? What jumps out?
Well, I think, the sample size is still pretty small. I think you have to pump the brakes. As good as the running game has been, I still look at the talent assembled, and I don't know if they can continue that moving forward through a 16-game schedule. I still look at that secondary, specifically corners. They need Darby back, and they need him back as quickly as possible. They've been exposed at times. Obviously, you saw the Chargers specifically get a ton of X plays against that secondary. I think that could be an issue if it continues to move forward. But all in all, I mean, it's almost time to admit this is a pretty good football team.
Yeah. Sidney Jones, anything there?
No, I mean, Sidney's still working on his rehab, and Doug talked about it a little bit today at the end of his press conference. There's nothing concrete. Yeah, the feeling I get is he's not going to play this season, and the Eagles are going to err on the side of caution. I mean, if you think about Darby coming back, and then you talk, they're very happy with Jalen Mills. They're extremely happy with Patrick Robinson. I think they've seen enough from Rasul Douglas to say that's pretty good for a 4th corner, and you just don't need to push him and tempt fate. So that's just a feeling I get. He'll probably come off the non-football injury list at some point and start practicing, and at that point you have 2 weeks to decide whether you want to activate him. Now, things could change because he might have injuries, and they could need him at that point. But if Darby's back, I just don't see why you would push it.
All right, Johnny Mac tomorrow with all the NFL news and notes. Thursday night with the countdown to kickoff. They'll be at the Boiler Room in Cape May. And, of course, that starts at 6 for Eagles and Panthers. You can hear the coverage right here on 97.3 ESPN. A battle of 4-1 teams. We'll dive into that more on tomorrow's show. Johnny Mac, take care, pal.
Hey, thank you.